The Mongolian steppes were a land of contradictions. Endless horizons stretched beneath the eternal blue sky, a realm of beauty and desolation, where biting winds carried both the promise of life and the threat of death. This was a land where survival depended not just on strength, but on cunning and unity, qualities that were rare among the fiercely independent tribes. And it was here, in 1162, that the winds of fate whispered of the birth of a boy who would change the destiny of the world, Temujin, the future Genghis Khan. But greatness was not handed to Temujin. His story began in hardship, forged in blood and betrayal. The upbringing of Temujin, a life forged by hardship and resolve. Long before he became Genghis Khan, the ruler of the largest contiguous empire in history, Temujin was a boy born into a world of unrelenting struggle. His life was shaped by loss, survival, and the harsh lessons of the steppe. The son of a minor chieftain, he faced a childhood defined by betrayal and deprivation, where every day was a battle to endure. These formative years taught him resilience, cunning, and the value of loyalty, all of which would become the foundation of his rise to power. Temujin was born in 1162, near the banks of the Anan River, in what is now northeastern Mongolia. His birth was said to be auspicious, marked by a vivid omen. He was born clutching a blood clot in his fist, a symbol that he was destined to be a great warrior. His father, Yesugei, was the leader of the Borjigin clan, a minor but noble lineage among the Mongols, while his mother, Hailan, was a captured woman from the Al-Kanud tribe. Temujin's name came from a tale of blood and vengeance. His father had recently killed a Tatar warrior named Temujin, and in a custom that mingled honor and superstition, the newborn was named after the fallen enemy to absorb his strength and spirit. The steppes were a land where life and death intertwine, and this early connection to violence foreshadowed the life Temujin would lead. As the son of a chieftain, Temujin's early years were relatively stable. His father's position afforded the family some security, and Temujin was introduced to the ways of the steppe, riding horses before he could walk, learning to hunt with the bow, and absorbing the stories of his ancestors by the campfire. These years were crucial in instilling the values of resourcefulness and self-reliance. But life on the steppe was never without danger. Feuds between tribes, raids, and the harsh natural environment constantly threatened survival. From a young age, Temujin learned that the world was neither fair nor forgiving, and that strength was the only guarantor of security. When Temujin was 9 years old, his father Yesugei sought to arrange his marriage to Bor, the daughter of a neighboring tribe. The marriage alliance was a common strategy among the nomadic tribes, meant to strengthen ties and secure alliances. Temujin was sent to live with Bor's family, a sign of commitment to the arrangement. But while traveling back home, Yesugei was poisoned by the Tatars, a rival tribe he had wronged in the past. With his father's death, Temujin's world was upended. The Borjigin clan, once united under Yesugei's leadership, fractured. Without a strong leader, they became vulnerable, and rival clans began encroaching on their territory. The betrayal ran deeper than external threats. The Borjigin clan itself turned on Yesugei's family. Seeing no benefit in protecting a widow and her children, the clan abandoned Hailan, Temujin, and his siblings to fend for themselves in the harsh Mongolian wilderness. For Hailan, this betrayal was a crushing blow, but she refused to succumb to despair. She became the backbone of the family's survival, foraging for roots and berries, fishing from frozen rivers, and teaching her children the value of resilience. Her strength left an indelible mark on Temujin, who admired her tenacity and learned from her unwavering resolve. But life was brutally hard. Food was scarce, and starvation was a constant threat. Temujin and his siblings scavenged for sustenance, sometimes resorting to stealing from neighboring clans. Each day was a fight for survival, and in this crucible of suffering, Temujin's character was forged. The struggle for survival within the family itself led to one of the most defining moments of Temujin's early life. Among the children left behind with Hailan was Begter, Temujin's half-brother. Begter, older and stronger, began to assert dominance over the family, claiming more food for himself and acting in ways that threatened Temujin's authority. To Temujin, Begdir was not just a rival for survival, but a challenge to the unity of their family. In a world where weakness invited exploitation, disunity was a death sentence. One day, Temujin, with the help of his younger brother Khasar, confronted Begdir. The confrontation turned deadly when Temujin shot Begdir with an arrow, killing him. The act was brutal, but for Temujin, it was a necessary assertion of leadership. In his mind, the survival of the family outweighed the bonds of blood. This moment revealed an early glimpse of the man he would become: pragmatic, ruthless when needed, and utterly committed to maintaining order. As Temujin grew older, his reputation as a bold and resourceful young man began to spread. This caught the attention of rival clans, particularly the Tatudi, a powerful Mongol tribe. Viewing Temujin as a potential threat, they captured him and placed him in a wooden yoke, a heavy and humiliating device meant to break his spirit. But Temujin's will was unbreakable. During his captivity, he observed his captors closely, noting their habits and identifying weaknesses. One night, he escaped with the help of a sympathetic guard who saw potential in the boy and chose to risk his life to aid him. This experience taught Temujin two invaluable lessons: the importance of turning enemies into allies and the necessity of patience in achieving victory. Under the eternal blue sky, Temujin rose not just as a product of the steppe, but as its master, shaped by its harshness and driven by its promise. His childhood, marked by struggle and resilience, was the crucible that forged the man who would one day become Genghis Khan, the unifier of the Mongols and the conqueror of empires. Temujin was the son of Yesujay, a minor chieftain of the Borjigin clan, and his wife Hailan. Yesujay was a warrior, proud and ambitious, but his dreams for his son were cut short by treachery. When Temujin was just 9, Yesujay was poisoned by the Tatars, rivals who had long been locked in a cycle of revenge with the Borjigin. Left fatherless, Temujin's family was abandoned by their own tribe, cast out to the wilderness. The boy learned to survive, not through kindness, but through sheer will. His mother, Hailan, was his first teacher, a woman of fierce determination, who showed her children how to scrape a living from the unforgiving land. But Temujin's spirit was restless. Even as he scavenged for roots and hunted rats to stay alive, he dreamed of more. He was not content to merely endure, he wanted to conquer. Temujin's first taste of leadership came through alliances, not conquest. To strengthen his fledgling power, he married Bort, a woman of the Ondrat tribe. Burt was not just a wife, but a partner, shrewd and loyal, who understood his dreams of uniting the fractious Mongol tribes. But their union was soon tested. Burt was abducted by the Merkits, a brutal tribe seeking revenge against Temujin's family. Desperate to save her, Temujin turned to his father's old allies. He secured the support of Togrul, the powerful Khan of the Khwarezmians, and his childhood friend Jamaka, who led his own Mongol tribe. Together their forces thundered across the plains, smashing the Merkits and rescuing Bort. It was a moment of triumph, but it also planted the seeds of rivalry. Jamaka, a charismatic leader, had his own dreams of power. For now, he fought alongside Temujin, but their paths were destined to diverge. The bond between Temujin and Jamaka had once been unbreakable, a bond forged in youth, when they hunted together, shared meat by the campfires, and dreamed of uniting the steppes. They had sworn themselves as Handa, blood brothers, a sacred relationship among the Mongols, one that transcended mere friendship. To be Handa was to promise unwavering loyalty, to protect one another against all odds. But ambition is a restless spirit, and in the hearts of both men, it began to whisper. As Temujin's following grew, Jamaka felt the warmth of their brotherhood turning cold. And for Temujin, his vision of unity grew sharper, clearer. He no longer dreamed of being one chieftain among many, he dreamed of ruling all the Mongols. For Jamaka, the shift in Temujin was as painful as it was alarming. He saw in his blood brother, not just a rival, but a betrayer of tradition. Temujin was breaking the ancient ways of the steppes. Instead of ruling through tribal alliances and noble lineage, he promoted men based on merit, commoners who had no place in Jamaka's eyes, in leadership. How can a man who does not respect our traditions claim to unite us? Jamaka once confided to his inner circle, his voice heavy with anger and sorrow. To him, Temujin's rise was not just a personal affront, but a threat to the Mongol way of life. Temujin, for his part, felt no less betrayed. He saw Jamaka's resistance as short-sighted, rooted in petty tribalism. "Jamaka sees only the past," Temujin told Bert one night as they camped beneath the stars. "He does not understand what we could become. If he will not join me, then he is my enemy." The rift between them grew into open war in 1187. Jamaka, rallying his forces, declared himself Gurkhan, the universal ruler of the Mongols, a title that cut at Temujin's very ambitions. Temujin, unshaken, gathered his loyal followers, now a formidable army disciplined under his reforms. The two armies met on the open steppe at Dalan Baljut, their banners snapping in the wind, their warriors chanting war cries. It was a clash of wills as much as swords, the culmination of years of tension and unspoken resentment. Jamaka's forces, larger and more traditional, fought with uncoordinated zeal. Temujin's army, though smaller, was disciplined and efficient, their loyalty to their leader unshakable. The battle raged for hours, with neither side gaining a clear advantage. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jamaka's forces managed to overpower Temujin's. It was a bitter defeat for Temujin, but the true horror came after the battle. Jamaka, in a display of ruthless dominance, captured 70 of Temujin's men. In a chilling act meant to send a message to all who opposed him, Jamaka ordered these men to be executed, not by the sword or the bow, but by boiling them alive. As the smoke and screams rose into the night, Jamaka's allies looked on, uneasy. Even among the Mongols who lived by harsh laws, this act was seen as excessive, an affront to the very idea of warrior honor. Jamaka, however, did not flinch. To him, this was necessary. "Let all who followed Temujin see their fate," he declared, though in his heart the weight of the act lingered. Jamaka was not a cruel man by nature, but fear of Temujin's rising power, had driven him to this extreme. Temujin, watching from the shadows of retreat, burned with rage. The loss of his men was a wound, but it was the manner of their deaths that cut deepest. He vowed that day not just to defeat Jamaka, but to destroy him utterly. Jamaka's victory at Dalan Baljut was hollow. His cruelty had sown seeds of doubt among his own allies. Many began to question his judgment. Why boil prisoners alive when the Mongols prided themselves on swift, honorable killings? Why alienate the tribes when unity was their only path to survival against the encroaching powers of the Jin and the Kittens? In the months and years that followed, Temujin began to rebuild his forces. His reputation, tarnished by the defeat, was restored by his unwavering dedication to his vision. He welcomed defectors from Jamaka's camp, offering them protection and a place in his growing army. Unlike Jamaka, Temujin treated his followers, regardless of their rank or origin, with fairness. One such defector, a former ally of Jamaka, described the difference between the two leaders. "Jamaka fights for power, for himself. Temujin fights for something greater. He fights for all of us." By 1190, the rivalry between Temujin and Jamaka reached its final, inevitable clash. This time, Temujin's forces were larger, better trained, and more united than ever before. The tribes under his banner no longer saw themselves as separate entities, but as part of a greater whole, bound by Temujin's laws and vision. Jamaka, once the charismatic leader of the steppes, now stood increasingly alone. His forces crumbled under Temujin's relentless assault. After a series of defeats, Jamaka was finally captured. When Jamaka was brought before Temujin, the air was heavy with silence. The two former blood brothers faced each other for the last time, their shared past hanging between them like a ghost. Genghis, knowing his fate, refused to beg for his life. "Kill me as noble," he said, his voice steady. "Do not shed my blood, break my back." Temujin honored his request. Though he had vowed to destroy Genghis, he could not deny the bond they had once shared. Genghis' death was swift, and his body was laid to rest with respect. The rivalry with Genghis taught Temujin one of the most important lessons of his life. Unity could not be achieved without mercy, but mercy alone was not enough. He realized that loyalty could not be demanded, it had to be earned through justice, fairness, and a vision that inspired others to follow. As Temujin rode away from Genghis' grave, he carried with him the weight of their broken brotherhood. But he also carried the knowledge that he had been tested and had emerged stronger. The steppe, vast and endless, awaited his next move. Genghis Khan's first great campaign was against the Jin Dynasty of northern China, a powerful empire that had long treated the Mongols as vassals. The Jin Dynasty ruled northern China like a colossus for centuries. Their cities were vast and rich, protected by massive fortifications, while their armies wielded advanced weaponry and disciplined tactics. To the nomadic tribes of the north, the Jin were both a formidable foe and a tantalizing prize, a land of silk, gold, and fertile fields. Yet their dominance rested on a delicate balance, for the Jin were perpetually beset by internal strife and the simmering resentment of their own subjugated peoples. When Genghis Khan turned his gaze toward the Jin, it was not a decision made lightly. To challenge the dynasty meant going against an empire whose resources dwarfed those of the fledgling Mongol state. But Genghis was no ordinary warlord. He understood that the Jin's strength was also their weakness. Their wealth made them soft. Their power bred arrogance. And their sprawling bureaucracy was slow, while the Mongol horde was swift as a falcon diving on its prey. The tension between the Jin and the Mongols had been building for years. The Jin had long treated the Mongols and other steppe tribes as vassals, demanding tribute and exploiting their divisions. Early in his rise, Genghis Khan had reluctantly paid this tribute, biding his time and consolidating his power. By 1210, however, the dynamic had shifted. The Mongols were no longer a fractured collection of tribes. They were a unified force under Genghis Khan, disciplined and driven by his vision. When the Jin emissaries arrived at Genghis Khan's court that year to demand tribute, they found a very different Mongol leader. "I am the flail of God," Genghis is said to have declared, his voice calm but laced with steel. "If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent me to punish you." The emissaries returned to the Jin court empty-handed, their message clear: the time for Mongol submission was over. In 1211, Genghis Khan led his armies southward across the Gobi Desert. It was not merely an army that advanced, but a force of nature, a tide of disciplined warriors hardened by years of unrelenting conflict. Numbering around 100,000 men, the Mongol horde was dwarfed by the Jin military, which could muster forces many times that size. But Genghis Khan knew that the Jin's numerical advantage was meaningless if he could exploit their weaknesses. The Mongols began their invasion with devastating speed. They bypassed fortified cities, striking at smaller towns and villages, sowing terror among the Jin populace. Refugees streamed southward, spreading tales of Mongol ferocity, stories of warriors who seemed to appear out of nowhere, striking with precision before vanishing into the steppe. One of Genghis Khan's greatest advantages was his mastery of intelligence. His spies had infiltrated Jin territory long before the invasion began, mapping routes, gathering information on enemy fortifications, and identifying allies among the discontented peoples under Jin rule. The decisive moment in the early phase of the campaign came at Yehuling in 1211. The Jin commander Wanyanjin underestimated the Mongols, believing his superior numbers and fortified positions would guarantee victory. He stationed his army in a narrow pass, intending to bottle up the Mongol advance. But Genghis Khan saw an opportunity. Using feigned retreats, a tactic the Mongols had perfected, he lured the Jin forces into abandoning their defensive positions. Once the Jin troops were exposed, the Mongols encircled them, launching a devastating attack from all sides. The Jin army was annihilated, and the pass became a slaughterhouse. The victory at Yehuling shattered the illusion of Jin invincibility. Word of the Mongol triumph spread like wildfire, and the Jin's tributary states and allies began to waver. By 1215, Genghis Khan turned his attention to the Jin capital of Zhengdu, modern-day Beijing. The city was a jewel of the north, heavily fortified and brimming with wealth. The Jin leadership, panicked and divided, hoped their walls would protect them. The Mongols, however, were not deterred by walls. Genghis Khan's army brought with it a secret weapon: siege engineers. These specialists, many of whom had been captured from the Khwarezmian Empire and other campaigns, constructed siege engines capable of hurling massive stones, flaming projectiles, and even diseased corpses into the city. The siege of Zhengdu was a grim affair. The Mongols cut off all supply lines, starving the defenders into submission. Within the city, hunger and disease ravaged the population. Desperate to avoid total destruction, the Jin court eventually sued for peace, offering vast amounts of gold, silk, and slaves. Genghis Khan accepted the tribute, but only as a temporary measure. In his mind, the Jin Dynasty had already fallen. He withdrew to regroup, leaving behind a message that was clear to all: Zhengdu's reprieve was fleeting. Though Genghis Khan himself did not live to see the complete conquest of the Jin Dynasty, his successors carried out his vision. Under the leadership of his son Ojdai Khan, the Mongols launched a renewed campaign in 1232, targeting the remnants of Jin resistance. The final blow came at the Battle of Kalka in 1234. The Mongols, now allied with the Song dynasty, another of the Jin's rivals, overwhelmed the last Jin stronghold. The Jin emperor, in a final act of defiance, refused to surrender. Instead, he burned his imperial robes and threw himself into the flames of his palace as the Mongols stormed the city. With the fall of the Jin dynasty, the Mongols cemented their dominance over northern China. The once mighty empire that had treated the steppe tribes as vassals was no more. The conquest of the Jin was a transformative moment for the Mongol Empire. It marked their transition from a nomadic confederation to a ruling force capable of governing vast, settled territories. The wealth of northern China flowed into the Mongol coffers, funding future campaigns and enriching their empire. But the victory was not merely material. For Genghis Khan and his successors, it was proof that no power, no matter how vast or entrenched, could stand against the will of a united Mongol people. It was a testament to the discipline, strategy, and relentless ambition that defined their rise under the eternal blue sky. Thus, the conquest of the Jin dynasty became one of the many stepping stones on the path to an empire that would span continents and reshape the course of history. In 1218, Genghis Khan turned his gaze westward to the Khwarezmian Empire, a Persian state that controlled a key stretch of the Silk Road. At first he sought peace, sending envoys to propose trade. But the Shah of Khwarezm, arrogant and dismissive, slaughtered the Mongol envoys and caravans. The Khwarezmian Empire, a kingdom of contradictions. The Khwarezmian Empire, located at the crossroads of the Silk Road, was a vast and wealthy realm stretching across parts of modern-day Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Afghanistan. Its heart was the city of Samarkand, once the jewel of Central Asia, a melting pot of cultures and ideas, and the capital of the empire at its zenith. Known for its sophistication, its art, and its culture, the Khwarezmian Empire, ruled by the Shahs of the House of Anishtegin, was a paradox in itself, at once a beacon of wealth and civilization, yet a kingdom that made one of the most catastrophic blunders in history by incurring the wrath of Genghis Khan. The Khwarezmian Empire arose from the decaying remnants of the Seljuk Empire, a vast Turkic state that had once dominated the region. By the early 12th century, the Seljuks had fractured into various smaller states, and the region was up for grabs. It was in this vacuum that the Shah of Khwarezm, Ala ad-Din Tekish, rose to power in the late 12th century. His son, Muhammad II, would be the ruler whose decisions led to the empire's doom. The empire was blessed with a rich geography, strategically located along the Silk Road, which passed through cities like Bukhara and Samarkand, centers of trade and scholarship. The region's wealth came from its agricultural base, trade, and, crucially, its control of important routes between the east and west. The Khwarezmians were sophisticated people with a strong economy based on the production of textiles, pottery, and scientific advancement. The empire's capital, Samarkand, was known throughout the world for its markets, architectural wonders, and libraries. Yet despite its great wealth and power, the Khwarezmian Empire had one fatal flaw: its rulers' pride and an inability to understand the scale of their enemies, especially the Mongols. While the Khwarezmian Empire basked in its glory, an entirely new force was rising on the Mongolian steppes, one that would soon change the course of history. Genghis Khan had united the scattered Mongol tribes under his banner by the early 1200s, forging a disciplined, mobile, and fiercely loyal army. By 1215, Genghis Khan had already conquered large parts of northern China, and he had set his sights on expanding westward into the heart of Central Asia. At this time, the Shah of Khwarezm, Muhammad II, had become a ruler feared and respected by those around him. He had ambitions to expand his empire, and was keen to assert dominance over his neighbors. However, Muhammad's arrogance and tendency to underestimate his enemies would prove to be his undoing. In 1218, the Mongol Empire sent a diplomatic envoy to the Khwarezmian court. Genghis Khan, always the strategist, wanted to establish peaceful trade relations with the Khwarezmian Empire, hoping to open new routes for Mongol merchants and soldiers. The Mongols had long valued trade, as it was the lifeblood of their empire. They saw themselves not only as conquerors, but as facilitators of commerce, uniting disparate parts of the world under their rule. The Mongol envoy, led by Ambassador Subutai, one of Genghis Khan's most trusted generals, carried with them the message of peace and cooperation. They proposed an agreement for trade, with the Mongols willing to send caravans across the Khwarezmian territory in exchange for favorable treatment and recognition. But when the Mongols arrived in the city of Otrar, a key trade city on the Khwarezmian frontier, something went terribly wrong. The governor of Otrar, a man who did not fully understand Genghis Khan's intentions, accused the Mongol caravan of being spies. He seized the goods and killed several of the merchants. Genghis Khan, ever patient and calculating, sent another envoy to the Shah, demanding the return of the goods and the responsible governor's punishment. However, the Shah's pride led him to make a fatal decision. Instead of offering an apology, Muhammad II decided to execute the Mongol envoys, claiming that Mongols were nothing more than a collection of barbarian raiders who needed to be taught respect. This act of disrespect was a direct affront to Genghis Khan and, in his mind, a declaration of war. To Genghis Khan, who held the eternal blue sky in reverence, an affront to his honor was not merely a political issue, it was a spiritual matter. Tengri would not look kindly on an insult of such magnitude. Without hesitation, Genghis Khan called for the full force of his empire to move against the Khwarezmian Empire. He sent 3 separate armies to begin the invasion, knowing that the attack on his diplomats had sealed the fate of the Khwarezmians. Genghis Khan's reaction to the execution of his envoys was calculated and swift. In 1219, his armies, numbering over 150,000 men, began their invasion of Khwarezm, the Mongols unleashing a ferocity that the world had never seen. The Khwarezmian response was disorganized, their forces scattered, their cities unprepared for the speed and scale of the Mongol onslaught. Samarkand, a city renowned for its beauty and wealth, was the first major target. It was an ancient city, surrounded by formidable walls, but the Mongols had perfected siege warfare. The Mongol war machines, led by siege engineers captured from various regions, began a relentless bombardment. Within months, the walls of Samarkand began to crumble, and the city was overwhelmed. Thousands of civilians were killed, and the surviving inhabitants were forced into slavery. The brutality didn't end there. Genghis Khan's forces systematically moved westward, capturing city after city. Bukhara, another major city in the empire, fell after a prolonged siege. When the city's defenders attempted to resist, the Mongols overran them with terrifying speed. Genghis Khan famously declared after Bukhara fell that he was the flail of God, sent to punish the inhabitants for their arrogance and defiance. The city was razed and its population slaughtered. The heart of the Khwarezmian Empire was collapsing under the Mongol onslaught. Merv, one of the empire's largest cities, was the next to fall. The Mongols besieged Merv with brutal efficiency, and when the city's defenders attempted to flee, they were hunted down and slaughtered. At Herat, another key city, the Mongols laid siege, and when the gates were finally breached, the fate of its people was sealed. The city was taken, and its entire population, estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands, was massacred. These victories were not just military triumphs, they were symbolic. The Khwarezmian Empire, once a beacon of power, was now reduced to rubble. The Shah Muhammad II, seeing his empire unraveling, fled westward, seeking refuge in the farthest corners of his domain. But Genghis Khan was relentless. Muhammad died in exile in 1220, defeated not just by the Mongols but by the sheer force of his own hubris and miscalculations. The fall of the Khwarezmian Empire was a watershed moment in world history. The brutality with which the Mongols erased the empire from the map sent shockwaves throughout the world. Cities were left in ruins, cultures were obliterated, and countless lives were lost. The Mongols did not merely conquer, they decimated, leaving behind a haunting legacy of destruction. For Genghis Khan, the conquest was not just about revenge, it was about sending a message. The Khwarezmian response to his envoys had not only dishonored him, but had threatened the fragile peace that Genghis Khan had worked so hard to establish. The Mongols were not just a force of nature, they were the hand of destiny, sent to reshape the world. In the aftermath, the Khwarezmian Empire was no more, and Genghis Khan's empire expanded to the west, with the Mongols controlling the vast expanse of Central Asia, Iran, and parts of the Caucasus. The destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire was one of the most devastating episodes in world history, and it marked the beginning of an age of Mongol supremacy. The Khwarezmians had underestimated Genghis Khan, thinking that their wealth, pride, and diplomacy could outmaneuver a force of nature. Instead, they became a tragic example of the consequences of underestimating the wrath of a man determined to make the world his own. Next, Genghis Khan set his sights on the conquest of Europe. The Battle of the Kalka River, the Mongol triumph, and the expansion into Europe. The Battle of the Kalka River in 1223 was a pivotal moment in the Mongol conquests, a battle that not only demonstrated the military genius of Genghis Khan's successors, but also marked the beginning of the Mongol Empire's westward expansion into Europe. Although Genghis Khan himself was not present during this campaign, having already turned his attention to other fronts, his sons and generals carried out a campaign that would have lasting consequences for the peoples of Eastern Europe. The Mongols had already established their dominance over much of Central Asia and Persia by the early 1220s. However, despite their overwhelming successes in the east, Genghis Khan's descendants sought to extend their reach further west, into the steppes of Eastern Europe, a region that was still largely untouched by the Mongol juggernaut. The immediate impetus for the Mongols' invasion came from the desire to punish the Kipchaks, a Turkic-speaking people living in the Kipchak steppe, north of the Black Sea, who had resisted Mongol authority. The Mongols, seeking to maintain their control over the vast territories they had conquered, decided to make an example of these people by launching an invasion into their lands. The Kipchak territories included parts of modern-day Ukraine, Russia, and the Caucasus, areas that the Mongols had not yet subjugated. The invasion of this area would also bring the Mongols into direct conflict with the Kievan Rus, the medieval Slavic state that controlled much of what is now Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. At the forefront of this Mongol military expedition was Subutai, one of Genghis Khan's most trusted and accomplished generals, and Jib, another of Genghis's brilliant commanders. These two men, both legendary tacticians, were tasked with leading the Mongol forces in their westward expansion. The Mongol forces, estimated to be around 20,000 to 30,000 men, advanced swiftly into the territory of the Kievan Rus, where they were met by a coalition army composed of the Kievan Rus, the Cumans, and other local tribes. The combined forces of the Rus totaled around 80,000 soldiers, greatly outnumbering the Mongols, who were famous for their ability to strike quickly and decisively despite being outnumbered in most encounters. The Rus princes, including Mstislav of Kiev and Mstislav of Chernigov, had received word of the Mongol approach and hastily assembled their forces. They were aware of the Mongols' reputation for devastating conquest, but were confident in their superior numbers. The Rus also had their Cuman allies, who were familiar with steppe warfare and had experience in battling other nomadic groups. The Rus commanders believed that their combined strength could overwhelm the Mongols, who they assumed would not be able to handle such a large and diverse force. However, the Mongols had a strategic advantage that would prove decisive: their ability to fight using unconventional tactics. Subutai and Jib lured the Rus and Cuman armies into a false sense of security, allowing them to advance and concentrate their forces. In doing so, they took advantage of their light cavalry, which could move faster and more efficiently than the heavily armed, slower units of the Rus armies. The Mongols initially retreated before the larger Rus forces, giving the Rus the false impression that the Mongols were withdrawing. This tactic, playing on the Rus' overconfidence, was a classic Mongol maneuver. When the Rus forces moved further into the steppes in pursuit, they were drawn into a trap. At the Kalka River, the Mongols turned to face them. At this point, the Mongols executed one of their most famous military tactics: encirclement. The Mongol cavalry, skilled in hit-and-run tactics and often using psychological warfare, attacked the Rus from multiple directions, systematically breaking their lines. As the battle unfolded, the Mongols used their famous feigned retreats, a tactic where they would appear to flee only to turn around and ambush their pursuers. This disoriented the Rus forces, who were unprepared for the speed and relentlessness of the Mongol attacks. The Rus army, encircled and unable to form an effective defensive line, was utterly defeated. Mstislav of Kiev and several other commanders were killed, and the remaining Rus forces were forced to flee. The Mongols captured several thousand prisoners and executed them, sending a clear message to the cities and rulers of Eastern Europe: the Mongols could not be defeated by mere numbers or traditional tactics. After their victory at Kalka, Subutai and Jib, with the remnants of their army, marched deeper into the Kievan Rus, striking fear into the hearts of all who heard of their ruthless efficiency. The defeat at Kalka had far-reaching consequences for the region. The Kievan Rus, a collection of city-states, was already in decline before the Mongol invasion due to internal strife, weakening central power, and external pressures. However, the Mongol victory at Kalka shattered any hopes the Rus had of resisting the Mongols. Although the Mongols did not immediately establish direct control over the Rus in the wake of this battle, their presence in the region marked the beginning of a gradual Mongol expansion into Eastern Europe that would continue for decades. The defeat also destabilized the region, leading to the fragmentation of the Kievan Rus into smaller, weaker states. Over time, the Mongols would conquer these lands, culminating in the Mongol invasion of Rus in 1240, which led to the complete destruction of Kiev and the establishment of the Golden Horde in the region. This would be a precursor to Mongol dominance over much of Eastern Europe, which lasted for centuries. In the immediate aftermath of Kalka, Subutai and Jib did not stay to occupy the region. Instead, they turned their sights on the Caucasus and even ventured into the Kievan Rus heartlands. Their campaign, however, had a more significant impact beyond just military conquest. It instilled deep fear across Europe, marking the Mongols as a terrifying and unstoppable force. Their swift and brutal tactics spread rumors that would echo through the courts of Europe, leading to widespread panic. After their victory at the Kalka River, the Mongols continued their expansion into Europe in the early 13th century, although their immediate impact on Western Europe would be less direct than on the Slavic regions of Eastern Europe. Subutai and Jeeb's campaigns against the Rus set the stage for what would become the Mongol invasion of Hungary and Poland. In 1237, Batu Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, launched a full-scale invasion of the Kievan Rus, taking advantage of the fragmented state of the region. The Mongols attacked, sieged, and destroyed cities such as Kiev and Chernigov, establishing the Golden Horde as a Mongol-ruled entity in the region. Batu's campaigns spread further into the heart of Europe. The Mongols reached the Caucasus in the south, defeated the Kingdom of Hungary in 1241, and even struck fear into the courts of Poland, where the famous Battle of Legnica occurred. In Hungary, despite a brief victory at the Battle of Mohály, the Mongols decided to withdraw temporarily, possibly due to the death of the great Khan Ojde in 1241, calling their leaders back to Mongolia for the election of a new Khan. Although the Mongols did not fully conquer the heart of Europe, their sieges, raids, and military incursions were significant. These campaigns not only devastated the lands they passed through, but also had profound psychological effects. Fear of the Mongols spread across Europe, influencing military strategies, alliances, and the political landscape for generations. The Battle of the Kalka River in 1223 was a crucial chapter in the Mongol Empire's westward expansion. It was a testament to the Mongols' tactical brilliance and their ability to subdue much larger forces with speed, deception, and relentless aggression. Although the immediate Mongol conquest of Europe would take decades to unfold, Kalka was an unmistakable signal that the Mongols were a threat that could not be ignored. In the long term, the Mongol presence in Eastern Europe, exemplified by the Golden Horde, would shape the region's history for centuries. The Mongol conquest disrupted the power structures of the Kievan Rus, leading to its fragmentation and eventual submission to the Mongol yoke. It also laid the groundwork for the Mongol influence on European politics, trade, and warfare, forever altering the continent's trajectory. Genghis Khan, born as Temujin in 1162 on the unforgiving steppes of Mongolia, remains one of the most influential figures in world history. His rise from humble beginnings, surrounded by adversity, to the ruler of one of the largest empires the world has ever known, is a saga of extraordinary military genius, political cunning, and visionary leadership. His legacy is not just in the empire he forged, but in the profound changes he brought to the world in a mere few decades. Before his death in 1227, Genghis Khan achieved remarkable military, political, and social feats that would reverberate across history. Genghis Khan was not only a great conqueror, but also a reformer. He sought to create a system of governance that could manage the vast territories he had acquired. One of his most significant contributions was the creation of the Yasa, a code of laws that governed all aspects of Mongol life, from military conduct to trade to the treatment of civilians. The Yasa helped to maintain order within the Mongol Empire and ensured that there was a universal set of rules, regardless of the people or territory in question. It was strict and harsh, but it helped to maintain stability in an empire that spanned vast distances and contained many different cultures and peoples. Genghis Khan also established a system of meritocracy within his empire. He promoted individuals based on their abilities, not their social status or aristocratic background. This allowed for the rise of talented generals, administrators, and bureaucrats who helped ensure the success of the Mongol Empire long after Genghis Khan's death. Genghis Khan promoted religious tolerance throughout his empire. Despite being a shamanist himself, he allowed his subjects to practice Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and other religions. This tolerance helped to integrate various peoples and cultures into his empire, making it a more cohesive and powerful force. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, his empire was the largest in the world. His death did not mark the end of the Mongol Empire, but rather the beginning of a new era. His successors, including Urjide Khan, Kublai Khan and others, carried the empire to even greater heights. The Mongols conquered Russia, the Middle East, and southern China, shaping the course of world history for centuries to come. If you want to hear more about Genghis Khan or his successors, please like the video, let us know in the comments section. Thank you for watching.